how do I deal with my out of control eating, or why am I eating in this way? So this is really important. I know many of you are like in workplaces, and you may get kind of upset that somebody you work with is able to, just have one donut or just have a piece of chocolate, but you're not. And often it comes up even more so when you're getting up in the middle of the night to eat, or when you start having dessert with someone and someone can just have a scoop of ice cream, but you will eat the whole pint or more. So it can make you feel like there's something wrong with you, and that's what we're going to talk about. And I think that's the important focus, because many of us think, well, there must be something wrong with me. They're okay. They can eat a small amount, but not me. So for you, it may be more that you are like craving it as if you were an addict. And so I want to talk a little bit more about what that's about. I don't know if you've ever caught yourself just daydreaming about stopping by the bakery on the way home, or daydreaming about going to the grocery store to get your, what I call your food fix. If that's the case, you may have joked that you are, I had one patient say that a certain food was like crack cocaine to her, and that she was a junkie when it came to that food. Well, you may not be too far off the mark. Now, I want to be clear that it's really not the food that is causing you to feel this way, although we know that the people who make food, or, food companies, do everything they can to get us hooked on certain foods. They add a lot of sugar, they add a lot of fat, they add a lot of salt, and some of us, that salt appeals to us. So they do everything in their power to get us to become hooked on foods. But it's really not just about the food. There's more to it than that. Struggling with overeating, out of control eating, can make you feel like you're a junkie, or make you feel like you're an addict. But it's not just simply a loss of control. It's not a matter of you don't have enough willpower, or you don't have enough, self-control. It's not about that. So it may be about something that's called reward deficiency syndrome. And reward deficiency syndrome has a genetic component. It's also related to, certain experiences you may have had in your life, like adverse childhood experiences. And RDS, or reward deficiency syndrome, involves a failure in the brain's dopamine reward center. Now, you all know, I think you've heard me talk about this before, that the dopamine reward center is that part of our brain where we get pleasure. So anything that gives you pleasure can light up your dopamine reward center. That could be anything from petting your dog, to hugging your child, to watching a sunset, to having a glass of wine, to overeating, okay? The dopamine is the brain chemical that's responsible for these feelings of pleasure, and anything that feels good affects that part of the brain. So it's not a surprise that people find eating pleasurable, or you should find it pleasurable. I was, thinking today about that, and I think many of the people I work with in the Anchor program no longer find food pleasurable. They have kind of a love-hate relationship with it. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'll ask people about that, and they'll say, oh, well, why do you overeat? Well, I just love food. And then when I ask them, well, tell me, what is your favorite food? I remember one woman in my program, the Anchor program, said her favorite food was mac and cheese. And I said, okay, well, just take a moment, and I want you to write at least a paragraph about what it is about mac and cheese that you really love. And you know what? She was completely unable to. Why? Because it's not the taste, the wonderful feeling that it gives her in her body. It's really that the mac and cheese was being used to stuff her emotions. So she wasn't tasting the mac and cheese. She wasn't, enjoying the creaminess or the flavors of the mac and cheese. She was just enjoying that feeling of stuffing down your feelings and, feeling full, which can feel very comforting. So anyway, if you have reward deficiency syndrome, which we're talking about, where your reward deficiency center does not produce as much dopamine as someone who doesn't have RDS. So that means you don't get the same level of pleasure that, someone who's not having out of control eating gets. If you don't have RDS, you eat the cookie, you taste the cookie, you love the flavor, and you're done. That's good. It's all good. Or maybe you have a second one, but you don't have a whole box. But for people with reward deficiency syndrome, if they eat something that they really like, they may eat too much or overdo it when it comes to other things, including things like alcohol or sex or gambling, etc. And that's an unconscious attempt to build up and get more dopamine to be produced in the brain and to feel that sense of pleasure. So as if that weren't bad enough, your brain chemistry can also play a second trick on you. Normally, the brain's hardwiring is in favor of the human species. It helps us to survive, right? So what the brain wants us to do is to do more and more of those things that make us feel good, because those are the things that help us survive, like eating and having sex and procreating and so on. So it motivates us to repeat activities that are life-sustaining by connecting them to that feeling of pleasure or reward. And this is why we crave food and we crave sex. Both are essential to survival. However, the hardwiring of the brain can go awry. When you use food to comfort yourself, to numb your feelings, to deal with stress, this behavior can lock into the same motivation cycle where reward equals survival, and therefore you want to keep doing it again and again and again. And the brain thinks, if it feels good, it must be important to my survival, so I will keep doing it. And even if you're not getting that same amount of pleasure reward from just having the one cookie or one scoop of ice cream, when you go into out of control eating, you will get that. And that's when it might get linked to the survival instinct. And this results in you feeling obsessed with eating and binging in an out of control way until you feel comforted. So if you have reward deficiency syndrome, you may not have enough dopamine receptors in the brain, and therefore you don't feel the pleasure. You end up seeking more and more and more of the same things that can bring you some pleasure. And your brain may make you feel as if eating that carton of ice cream or a whole bag of chips or a whole chicken is a matter of life or death. It's a matter of survival. Okay, so you're asking yourself, so what? Like, how does this help me? I don't even know if I have reward deficiency syndrome. Well, first, there's a couple things that I think can help you. First, it's easier to forgive yourself and not judge yourself if you know that your out of control eating is a matter of brain chemistry and not something is wrong with me, or I'm just weak, or I'm just not like everybody else. Understanding that it may be a result of reward deficiency syndrome can help you move away from self-blame that's so common to people who are struggling with out of control eating. Number two, knowing that your brain handles pleasure and reward in a particular way can help you understand that you might be vulnerable not only to food issues, but also to other types of addictions as well. Just like I was saying about another client in my Anchor program, I had a lady who came to me after she had gastric bypass surgery for obesity. And when I saw her, she had already lost a significant amount of weight, but she had started drinking heavily. So that predisposition to out of control eating to can also be translated into a predisposition to other addictions, and it's for the same reason, that reward deficiency. So, this is important to know. This is important information, but most importantly, understanding reward deficiency syndrome can point you to an effective solution. Whatever you're struggling with, whether it be addiction to alcohol or whether you are having out of control eating, healing is a matter of healing the brain. A lot of people want to focus on, well, I just need to lose weight and then I won't have out of control eating. And if you think about it, you know that that's not true. Also, you know that probably you've been in that situation where you've lost weight and you still had out of control eating after a certain period of time. Like you may have had a temporary period where everything was great, but then later it came up that, everything wasn't so great and you start out of control eating again. So whatever your particular problem is related to reward deficiency, you have to heal the brain. So the same kinds of things that help people go into recovery from alcohol or drugs can also help you. Things like finding spiritual meaning. I just interviewed on my podcast a woman who wrote a book called The Religion of Thinness, and she says that many women who are having out of control eating, food addiction, emotional eating, or binge eating are hungry for meaning in their lives. It's a spiritual hunger. It's not a physical hunger. So a lack of social support, feeling lonely and isolated, all of these things, if you can change them, can help to heal your brain and move beyond out of control eating. Social support helps to increase the feel-good chemicals in your brain and give you true pleasure and satisfaction that you can't get just from eating. So as well, understanding that this problem is not a lack of willpower. It's not because you're weak. It's not because something is wrong with you. Often, as I mentioned briefly, this comes about because of adverse childhood experiences, whether you've been abused or neglected as a child, whether you witnessed violence in your life, whether you had a parent or caregiver who themselves had a food addiction or another addiction or mental illness. All of these things can actually change the hardwiring of the brain, and they can be a cause of reward deficiency syndrome. So understand this. Reward deficiency syndrome is not your fault. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not a moral failing. It's a medical issue that has to do with your brain chemistry. So given all of that, you can see why fad diets are not going to fix out of control eating. As a matter of fact, they will make it a lot worse. And it's most important to look for a long-term solution that will help to heal the brain and also address the emotional issues related to overeating. There are many supplements that you can use that will help the brain to function better, and that's something that we work with in the Holistic Anchor program, is giving you a list of supplements that can help you. And changes in your lifestyle can also help. Regular exercise is one of the most important things to help your brain, and in the long run, these are the things that will help you deal with your out of control eating. So I've mentioned the Anchor program several times in this Facebook Live, and I am doing that because I just want to let you all know the Anchor program is a 12-week non-diet approach to out of control eating, binge eating, food addiction, emotional eating, etc. And we have many people who've gone through the program and found that they've been able to heal the brain and put an end to these unwanted food behaviors